the safety of playing the old game the old way. Because we are undergoing a healthcare revolution today. Over the last 5 to 8 years, the hospitals have been totally upended with the new technologies that are available to them. Let's take a look at some things. It's about, depending on the year, about 100,000 deaths a year due to errors. When you go to the hospital, 1 out of every 5 doses is in error. 7% of those, which in a 300-bed hospital, it's about 40 per day, can be life-threatening. Medical advances are happening so quickly that caregivers can't keep up. Due to the Affordable Care Act, there are going to be more patients who are less likely to pay. According to a presidential report, the key to solving these problems is a greater reliance on IT. So I led a group of researchers over the last year and a half to study some of the key IT innovations in healthcare, such as electronic health records, RFID, radio frequency identification, CRM, customer relationship management, mobile health, telehealth, big data, data mining, and others. And we took a look at what are the key technologies that are really providing value to the hospitals. Measurable, sustainable, quantifiable metrics. And we created best practice cases in each of these areas. So we don't have time to go into all of them, but I'd like to just share one, and that is RFID. How many of you are familiar with radio frequency identification? So I would say probably 80% of you. It's essentially, it's the easy pass that you have in your car. Now, just as brief background, the British Air Force developed RFID during World War II to help identify the friend versus foe aircraft. Now, the technology languished for a number of years, and it wasn't until 2003 when Walmart and the Department of Defense decided they were going to mandate their suppliers that they had to use RFID on their shipments. But this was arguably successful because there weren't any standards. And then in 2006, ISO created standards in the RFID industry, and all of a sudden, progress started to move. They started to move the needle, and Walmart figured out that it actually had 16% fewer stockouts when its suppliers used RFID, which is billions of dollars for Walmart. So in the healthcare industry, RFID is just starting, we're just starting to see RFID in a number of applications. To tag mobile equipment, so we know where they are at. There were 87 recalls of IV pumps just a few years ago, so that the patient and the nurse can have meaningful interactions, and this can be automatically recorded. 1 in 20 people that go to the hospital have what's called HAI, health-associated infections. These are primarily caused because the caregiver doesn't wash their hands. There are new technologies out there to encourage the caregiver to wash their hands. Tag babies so that there are fewer abductions and mix-ups, and tag pharmaceuticals so there are less counterfeiting, and tag files so that there are we can find the files when we need them. So I just want to give you a brief overview of Florida Hospital that represents what we think is best practice in this area of RFID. They're located in Orlando. This is the hospital. This is their hub. They have 8 other campuses. They've won a number of awards, including one of the top hospitals by U.S. News and World Report 3 years in a row. So I just want to share with you Florida Hospital's journey. In 2005, they began their RFID by putting tags in their pharmaceutical refrigerators and tagging their mobile assets, because these mobile assets tend to walk out the door with the patient. The reason was because in 2004 there were 4 hurricanes in 1 year in Florida, and they lost about $60,000 because 2 refrigerators in the pharmaceutical department they lost power. But unfortunately, this was a big failure for the hospital because they hadn't centralized their IT. Come on in, there's plenty of seats. They hadn't centralized their IT department, so they didn't know if a battery went out, who were they going to call? If a refrigerator was losing power, who should they call? If there was a theft and one of the wheelchairs was going out the door, who should they call? As a result, they stopped the program, they stopped expanding it, and they kind of regrouped for about 3 years. Then in 2007, this cost them $600,000 to install that system. Then in 2007, they figured that they had a problem in their cath lab where they were running out of products 2 to 3 times a week. And the physicians had to use a secondary, non-preferred product. This is an example of the inventory room in the cath lab. And these products range in price from about $2,000 to $25,000 each. And they were manually inventoried, and frequently they would be wrong. So they installed a smart cabinet, where today manufacturers have RFID on their products, so they put them in the cabinet, it automatically takes inventory. When the caregiver or a nurse or whomever goes up, they take their badge, it knows that you are taking a product. Once it goes off the shelf, it immediately knows it's you. When you shut the door, it shuts automatically. It attributes that to your badge. Then you have to figure out, okay, what did I do with that product? And you have to account for that in your records. This system, so they had a 500% ROI. Inventory was reduced 34% on the first day. They decreased their inventory 100% in a few months, and because they could use bulk purchases and they could do this more accurately, they saved $80,000 in just 3 months. The cost of the system was $35,000. Then they said, okay, we like RFID again. We're going to try it again. This time we're going to centralize our RFID. They tried it again with asset tracking, and they tracked their nurses, which is a big deal. A lot of times we're afraid to track people because of this big brother mentality, but they explained to people we're not going to use it for punitive reasons. The cost was only $20,000, and what they found was they were able to eliminate people having to go around to the refrigerators and manually check that they had to do every day or every hour in some places. They were able to reassign 12 full-time employees, saving them about $450,000. They had a 21% performance improvement with their nurses. I'll share with you in the next slide why. And they had a 4% lower turnover. And this is what happened. When they put the tag on the nurses and they tracked nurses, they found out that some nurses, they would go to the patient's room and figure out, the patient wanted a glass of water. They would go get the water. Then they would come back, they wanted their medication. They would go get their medication. So they had all these back and forth to the patient rooms, never really having a quality discussion with the patient. So they educated the nursing team, and then after they tagged them, and then you can see here, this is the new workflow pattern, and it's much cleaner. And it's very hard for the nurses to do hourly rounding because they have so many things to do. But if they plan their day better, the Florida hospital found that they could get 90% or more compliance with the nurse rounding. It was very successful for them. Now, unfortunately, only about 7 to 10 hospitals in the country use RFID. And the reason is because they're very complicated and very costly. They can range in price from a project from $50,000 to over $2 million. So we created a little map to help hospitals based on the Florida hospital's journey, and that the first thing they need to do is tag things in a centralized fashion. And then after you tag things, then you can move on to tagging people. Because people tend to be sometimes a little bit irrational, and they don't work in the real world the way we think they work in the lab. If a hospital follows this step-by-step procedure, we found, and the studies show this, that they can save about $600,000 a year. And I think that if hospitals follow this, try it a little bit, one step at a time, they'll find out that they like it. Thank you very much.